Community in Crisis is an organization in the Somerset Hills of New Jersey with a mission to combat substance use disorder through youth and family education and recovery support, building a healthier, more connected community. We are joined this evening by Jody D'Agostini, a founder and current board chair, and Andi Williams, the executive director. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for having
Thanks, Bill.
And lest there be any confusion, though we share a last name, Andi and I are not related.
us.
I don't
But we
know if that's under full disclosure or what that comes under, but there we are.
we do share the same wicked sense of humor, though, I think, Bill.
Yeah, but we have to be careful about exercising that on this show, if it's all right with you.
Thank you for the reminder.
Your the story, the start of the community in crisis goes back to four volunteers sitting around a kitchen table. I believe, Jody, at your house.
Yes.
Can you let's give my audience a little history. For starters, maybe let's tell them where the Somerset Hills. Tell them what communities, where you're located to begin with.
Yeah, it was in 5 towns in the Somerset County that we really encompass: Bernardsville, Basking Ridge, Peapack, Gladstone, Bedminster, Far Hills. And it got started because in December of 2013, my youngest daughter, who was a nursing student at college, called me, hysterical basically, from school because she had lost two friends to overdoses 2 days apart, one on a Wednesday and one on a Friday. And called me, couldn't breathe. You just knew something had terribly wrong had happened. And I had to talk with her for a couple hours really to understand this. I didn't really know the scope of what the problem was back then. We did not know it was opioids back then. We just knew that we were losing children to overdose deaths, and there were a lot of children in and out of rehab. Again, a lot of shame around it at the time, no understanding of what was going on. We really didn't understand that it was pills to heroin. It seemed to be the route back then. And so through her tears, one of the last things she said to me was, how many more are we going to lose before someone does something about it? Which resonated with me. I'm a very spiritual person, so I was praying on it all night long because I couldn't sleep. I think I had a school of 2,000. We lost two friends in the whole time that I was in high school, one from a car accident and one from lightning. And to think of two children lost within 2 days that were young, I just said something is terribly wrong. Statistically, I started putting things together about the magnitude of people that had been lost and or in and out of rehab. And I was the chair of the board of the Somerset Hills Y, which is a really large Y system in our area. I called the director of the Y the next morning and I said, I think we need to do something. Can you get me some people, volunteers, to start studying this? Because I'm a science major. I don't want to be reactive. I want to study it, do something more evidence based. So we got a pool of people together and we started looking at it like what's going on in our community. At that point, we thought it was localized, but we didn't realize it was national. And that's how we started. We just a real committed group of people that felt the same way and started feeling that this was something a little bit more than anybody had recognized. And we started looking at what was out there to try to build a model that we could in our community combat what we learned to be the opioid epidemic.
Now, at some point, I connected with your group because I grew up in Bernardsville.
Yes.
And I happened to be in Bernardsville. My mother had died, and we were selling her house. And I picked up a copy of the Bernardsville News,
Yes.
and there was some indication that the kids had died, but the way it was presented was a bit mysterious. And actually, in terms of stigma, it really speaks, in hindsight, speaks to the stigma around the disease. It may have talked of overdoses. It didn't really discuss fatalities.
Right.
And I wrote a letter to the editor
Yes.
essentially, I was saying, let's get real. I lost my son. There
Right.
are others. You really want to know about this if you want to do something. He
Yeah.
got in touch with me. They wound up sending a reporter. The reporter did a whole interview on our family story, and then there was an editorial as well. And
Yeah.
I believe that's what you read.
And then I reached out to you and wanted to get you involved because we were doing a series of town halls. We were trying to educate ourselves on what was going on. So we knew that you'd be a great resource. You had lived experience, if you will, and you seemed to understand what was going on when you got to go back 10, 11 years. People didn't understand what was going on, and you did. So it was nice to have you help us along our journey.
Now, Andy, where did you fit into the picture? Were you working at the Somerset Hills Y at the time?
I was dragged in, kicking and screaming, Bill.
So
Um,
were you one of the four at the kitchen table?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Jody, the story was so compelling. We all felt very passionate. And a lot of people ask me anyway, and I'm sure Jody and others, what's your personal connection to this? Why did you get involved? Because we were all volunteers for a number of years. And I fortunately haven't had any family personal crisis in this area, but I had three teenage kids at the time. They're in their 20s now. And it was just one of those there, but for the grace of God go I, knowing that it could happen to anyone and everyone, as we well know now, more than we did then. I jumped in with both feet. Jody's leadership is inspiring, and I knew that whatever we did would gain momentum with Jody's passion and connections and so on behind it. So that's really my story about how it began. And then having worked as a volunteer for a number of years, nights and weekends, we were meeting frequently. I then, when we eventually got enough funding, I was able to move over and start actually working at CIC and left the Y system. Yeah.
How did you give us a little more history after four people? And Jody, you started to tell us after four people, you wound up having some town-wide presentations.
Yes, we did. So it was fortuitous at the time that Chris Christie was our governor, had lost one of his best friends. A pretty compelling Facebook interview if you ever have time to look at it. He talked about losing his big fall from grace from a elite Ivy League institution at one of his best friends. Went to law school, practicing in the city, and basically died of an overdose with a needle at his arm at a hotel in Route 22 in New Jersey, and lost his family, lost his job, and of course ended up losing his life. And so that he created through the Governor's Council on Alcohol and Tobacco, he commissioned them to study what was going on. They put out an 88-page report, which was all evidence-based. We grabbed that report, we digested it as a group, and we created 7 different working groups to really combat it at the local level in every area, hitting it hard because we said, hey, listen, time's of the essence. We can't lose anymore. We don't want kids to start going down and getting addicted. We don't want them to die. So we felt that we had to really get on it as quickly as possible. And so we involved pretty much the entire community, from the schools to the Y, the Visiting Nurse Association, the hospitals, you name it. We hit the medical professionals, the police. We got everybody involved in a big way, even realtors, because drug seekers were going on open houses and grabbing, stock medicine cabinets. So we really hit it hard. And we then actually presented twice at the Governor's Council down in Trenton. Andy and I were there. And it was pretty amazing because after we presented, they came and were embracing us. They were like, we had enough money to do the report. We had no money to actually fulfill anything in here. So isn't that the government's way? It's okay. We funded a little bit, but we didn't get it to the finish line. They wanted it to happen at the community level, grassroots, if you will. So they were really embracing us. And we did help a lot of communities because we created a lot of marketing materials and resource materials and really a way to get about this, and then shared it with communities, said, we've got to do this. Once we realized it wasn't just our community, it was nationwide. Let's get on this, and let's get on it as hard as we can. So we were very much of an open book, trying to involve as many communities as possible to get this reach out there.
How did you, other than the 7 working groups, how did you go about educating yourselves personally? There's so much to learn.
We were talking.
There's still so much to learn.
We met with a lot of professionals in addiction, physicians that were working in this area. So we definitely did a more scientific deep dive on it, and then we read a lot. And our group was pretty eclectic, if you will. So we had all different walks of life, including physicians and pharmacists and people. So we had the right people in the room, if you will. And then, of course, then they were interviewing people. We'd get back together. This is why when we were meeting, and then we had this 88-page document and we put it all together, and then we created these groups with like action items and things that everybody had to do right away to get this going. Go ahead.
Really, the Governor Christie's report, the 88-page report, was really our blueprint, Bill. And much of it was geared to grassroots work, local communities trying to solve local problems. Much of the initiatives that we embraced and rolled out were no to low cost. So it was easy for volunteers and various stakeholders in our community to be able to pick it up and run with it and deliver it, because it literally was meetings, town halls, posters, tabling events. It was very low cost or no cost initiatives. So, and you, rather than be completely overwhelmed by the enormity of the task at hand, which we could easily have been, with these 7 different working groups, it was like water dripping on a stone. And gradually you started seeing a shift in education, awareness about it as a disease, and people reaching out and being more vulnerable about their own struggles and so on. So it definitely was a sort of sea change that took a while to take hold, but which was this multifaceted movement, wasn't it, Jody?
Yes. And we started, Bill, just in prevention and education. That was our thing. Let's get out there and get out there fast. We wanted, again, less people going down the funnel, because we knew once they got addicted, it was really difficult to get them off. And we were worried about all these young deaths that were going on. But then we branched off into another area, because all we want to do is see what are the unmet needs in our community. And then we started again reading all the research saying that there's a 90% relapse rate. They would go to get treatment, maybe go away 3 months or whatever, come back and immediately relapse, 90% or better. And so we said, wow, we're missing something here. They need to have some supportive community of connection back when they get back to the community, so they're not going back with a group of people that were using substances at that point. They don't want to live in their parents' basement forever. So we wanted to give them some tools, resources, and a community basically that supported them. And that's when we created that another pillar of our work. And that was the Sobriety Support Initiative. Like, how do we keep these people and support these people through groups, activities, programs, and then the community itself to keep people from using again?
One thing you mentioned the 7 working groups, and when I look at, been rereading some of your literature recently. It seems to me one thing that you've done very well is to avoid having silos. That you're a very homogenous sort of group. That the police are talking to us, or whoever should be. That all the various you've managed to bring. Well, I was struck by this. I was at an event of yours the other night, and 2 words. I know your community in crisis, but the 2 words that came up to me was the community in connection and community in conversation.
Yes.
The CIC stands for far more than crisis now.
Oh, yeah. We've rebranded actually to CIC, because we figure crisis is, even though it is still a crisis, we just didn't think a crisis can go on for 11 years. We wanted to actually have something a little more positive. So for grant purposes, we're still community in crisis, but otherwise we rebranded to CIC, and community in connection is a large piece of what we're doing right now in that prevention side.
And altered your logo a little bit too.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And actually, I'm very proud of the fact that we brought all stakeholders into the room. We'd meet monthly. We were really a dedicated, amazing group. Volunteers. The police were coming to the meetings from like the towns. We got the police chiefs involved. They were helping us with the town hall. Chief in Bernardsville at the time actually created a trifold, so that when he would go out, if they had to revive him with Narcan, they created a trifold to give to them. And he said, you changed our complete view on this. They had obviously these are addicts or whatever out there, into more compassionate way of looking at it, as maybe we can help them. So we completely had a mind change of even the police in our towns, and they were extremely supportive. So it was really good. And they would come to the meetings. We had the clergy involved. One of the big things we did at the beginning was, because it's a shame, there's so much shame around this. It was like they're sitting in the pews, or their parents are sitting in the pews. How do we reach them? Because nobody wants to talk about this. So one of it was get the clergy engaged so they can preach on it on the weekends, and then maybe let them know that there's a resource in their community. And then again, we can start the conversation.
You said the Bernardsville. Go ahead, Andy. You can help with this. She said the Bernardsville police chief, but stop me if I'm wrong. I think it was Brian Bobowitz who was the Basking Ridge police chief.
Yeah, it was Brian Bobowitz with the Bernards Township Police Department. So it was Brian, and fully admitted that he used to think quite badly of people who were struggling with substance use. And that we had changed his view of these people. And then he took it upon himself to then make sure that his detectives were trained and understood that the substance use disorder was a treatable chronic disease and not a poor personal choice. And I saw him not that long ago, and he's still surprised at how he changed his mind about this. There were a lot of naysayers, Bill, back in 2014. So
Oh,
many people said, it's not happening. What are you talking about? It was not front page news. It was not a white suburban problem. It belonged in the streets of Newark and Patterson. It's not in my backyard mentality. And of course, that changed. That changed. And now there's no denying it's people completely embrace the fact that it's in our midst. It's our neighbor. It's in our families. It's in our friends.
No,
well, people would be misled, I think. Somebody might say, listen, Somerset Hills, and we've got two attractive, well-bred, well-spoken ladies representing us. But in fact, it seems to me, and I discovered this when I was there more frequently selling my mother's house, that the ethnic diversity within the Somerset Hills is striking.
yes, it has changed dramatically.
Um,
Population, particularly in Basking Ridge, and then there's a Paraguayan community in Bernardsville and some other Hispanic communities as well. So yeah, it's changed quite a bit.
yeah, there is quite a mix. You mentioned the governor's report, but if you were creating a template for another community, starting
Mhm.
from scratch, what recommendations might you have?
I could start that. I think it's not so much the content, but the drive, the motivation, the commitment, the dedication, the passion. We do talk to other communities, and we do have toolkits that they can review, and like a menu they can pick and choose from and then implement in their own communities. But really, none of that's really going to stick unless you've got a Jody D'Agostini or an Andi Williams who are passionate about the cause, who really, when you see a life saved, we just saved one last week. We saved a young man. We used Narcan. We've got him into treatment and we saved his life. And he's a young man with so much of a future, a well-to-do family and so on. And when you see that, when you witness that, it is such a motivating factor that you can, what, one life's enough, sure, but we can do so many more, help so many more lives. And so if a community doesn't have that kind of awareness or commitment, I'm not sure it's going to really work. So if I'm going to build a template for a community, I want to first look at the leadership. I want to look at who's behind it, what their motivation is, and whether they're in it to win it, really.
Certainly, one thing I hear you, and I couldn't agree more because over the course of time, my son William died at the very tail end of 2012, and I have branched out. I have met any number of people. I've come across. I've written, and people have written stuff. I've had the radio show, so it's a network that's grown around of connections. And anytime I see anything that's really successful, there is a strong individual, as you say, that's at the core of it, that's starting it. And more often than not, as a matter of fact, it's mothers, wives, women. It's the women that are leading these organizations. The men are helping out, but I've written a piece about, guys, we got to man up and do our share too.
I think
Yeah.
I look at it as I know my big motivator is because I didn't have it directly in my family, but I've one offs all over the place. I didn't want to lose any more of our children. I was like, as a mom, maybe that's part of that. Maybe that's the thread, Bill. I don't know. It's as a mother, you have this protective maternal thing. I was looking at this going, this is a young life that never really got fulfilled. That was cut way too short. And I just thought that many of these people had funerals where no one came. There was no obituary in the paper. I always harken back to my brother that died at 25 from cancer. We had the support of, I bet you 1,500 people came to his wake. We had casseroles. We had people coming by, and we had all that support to help lift us up in a really difficult time. And now I look at these where we were trying to find the kids that died. Like it was quiet. No one knew what they died from. There was no funeral. there was nothing. And I thought, how can this be? This is a young life. Let's respect that and realize that this is something, a child that never got to full maturity, even. And that was what was upsetting and troubling me. I couldn't even reckon with the fact that we were losing all these young people. And maybe many of them at the beginning were coming. One of them, again, got it from a sports injury, one of the initial young men that died. And then he was pills to heroin. So it wasn't even a choice he made. It was something that he got addicted from these pills. And then, of course, as we know, it was pills to heroin being a lot more accessible and much cheaper. And he wasn't alone. There were so many individuals when we started peeling it back, and I started realizing that this, again, it was the same story repeated again and again. And then again, the families, they started talking with me, they started talking with Andi, but they had no one to even speak to. So one of the biggest things we did to start with was a family support group. We got a licensed clinical therapist who was trained in addiction to host them and bring these families together and say, what are the resources out there? And let's grieve together, whether the child was still struggling or it passed away. But we wanted to make sure that they had some support with the challenges that they were facing. And they had no one to talk to. They didn't even want to tell their friends what was going on with their own children. We have trouble with our children. We get with our girlfriends and we talk away and we problem solve together. These people didn't have anybody. They were really on their own. And I think it was a commitment on all of our parts to make sure that we gave them whatever resources. So we were all ears, what's needed out there. And we're continuing to do that. We're trying to be as nimble as can be. Right now, we've done things to try to purge them so that they can get jobs. Because again, if you've got something like that, even a misdemeanor on your job resume, you might not get a job. If we can get that wiped, which we've been doing for people, then they can get and re-enter the job market and have some hope for their future. We're just doing this whole recovery-friendly workplace to try to get businesses to understand that amongst you are people that are dealing with addiction. Give them the support that they might need to get, just like any disease. You need that supportive community to be able to get you there so that they don't eventually lose their job due to this, whatever they're using, whether it's drugs or alcohol.
Well, you're reminding me of something, and this is right off the top of my head. I had a recent guest. If either of you have something to write with, write this down. Mm-hmm. We had a recent guest. His name was Kevin Hyer, and he still is. He's a lawyer. But at a certain point, he had a run-in with, I believe it was methamphetamine. He's since in recovery, and he's established the Hyer Calling, Hyer, the Hyer Calling Foundation, if you Google it. And what they do is help people that are in recovery find jobs. And if that means helping clean their record, whatever they can do. So that's someone you might want to contact with. And of course, anybody else that's listening might want to contact too.
Yes.
And I know this sounds like self-promotion, but if you go on the WJFF.org, you can find prior podcasts and you'll find my interview with Kevin Hyer.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. We have a robust recovery support team, and they are all individuals with lived experience. And so they do an awful lot of peer-to-peer work. And when people come to tour our location and they meet one of our staff, and that person might be a young, bubbly, full of life, full of laughter, hardworking, and so on. And then you're to say to that person who's visiting, 6 months ago, this person was on their knees. Their family had disowned them. They were unhoused. They didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And now they're working with us. They have hope, they have purpose, and every single one of them individually and without having heard it from each other, call us their second family, because that's what you become. And when you see these individuals whose lives are changed because of employment, it's just a wonderful thing. So I know it's always been one of Jody's priorities is to if you give people employment and purpose and hope, that's a huge game changer in their sustained recovery. So I love seeing it in action every single day with my team.
Over the course of the history of the organization, how much change do you see in terms of stigma? Everything you've described, clearly you, as an organization, you've reduced stigma, but it's still, it seems to me any conversation I have with people about addiction, sooner or later the word stigma comes up. It's the big wall that everybody has to push through or climb over.
So it's in
Mhm.
our mission, Bill, and we are all over that actually to try to reduce or eliminate as best we can with stigma. So one of the biggest things was we were fortunate enough to work with this clergy. We got a church basement to start in, and it was really a great donation from the church. But Andy and I went down into the church basement. We said, we can't stay here because this is exactly we're hiding in the basement, and that is just not feeling right to either of us. As generous as the offer was from the church, it didn't feel right. So we went out on a limb because we got a little bit of funding from a couple benefactors and the Horizon Foundation, and we got a rental on Main Street. And we put our sign right on Main Street. And it was important, that visual. It was like, we are going to bring it right here in front of everybody's face in Bernardsville, at the old Bernardsville Library. And that was important to us because we wanted to start with that. And everything, even when we were showing children that had died, we have once a year, we put their faces on it because these kids look like everybody's kids. It changes people's perception when they realize it could be your kid, it could be my kid, but in any case, it's our kids, it's our community. These kids belong to us, and we put them out there. These beautiful children, and we showed them. So we've tried to again take down the walls through everything we've been doing, through our messaging, through our marketing, and even where we put our first home, if you will, at the Bernardsville Library. We are on Main Street because this is where we belong.
Mm.
What do you think makes you unique as an organization? I have a thought, but I want to hear from you first.
That's an interesting question
It's the,
because the
it's the people. I don't think you get people. Andy brought it up earlier. I am so blessed by the people that are working for us. I have two directors, and Andy and Tony Knoll. They give their heart and soul. This is not a job for them. This is a career. This is a life calling, I would say, for both of them. You don't get that out of your traditional employees, the amount that these people give to us. So our employees are and staff are top drawer, and they're committed. We have been looking for those people, and they deliver in a big way. Our volunteers the same. Our board has gotten stronger and stronger. Again, I wanted people that bought into the mission, understood the mission, maybe have some personal connection to this. They give more. And so when you get that kind of talent in the room and the diversity of thought, I think it's definitely the people that we've been doing it because we get a cross section of people that are giving great ideas, and we've been very nimble. We're always searching what's out there and what's needed. We don't want to duplicate efforts. We want to support things that are out there and make sure that we take it to the next level for things that are not resources that are not there for people that are struggling.
I'd like to add to that too. I think also what makes us unique, Bill, is that we are creative in the way we approach the issue we're trying to um, help people with. So, as examples, with our youth, we know all too well that if you lecture them or you do a sort of dare type programming where they're saying basically don't do drugs, it's goes over their heads. It's not really sinking in. It's not resonating with parents either. It's not my kids. So what we do is we create opportunities for the kids to actually engage with us in a sort of roundabout way. So we offer a lot of community service opportunities for youth, middle school and high school. And there aren't many middle schoolers because they're deemed too young generally to be volunteers. But we'll bring them in and we'll give them wonderful opportunities for community service. And then whilst they're with us in our midst, we are able to talk about staying risk averse, about making healthy choices, about being enough in yourself without having to turn to substances. We give them opportunities to talk about their struggles and so on. And I think that you have to think that there's a boatload of kids out there who will be at a party one day or who have already been at parties where they're going to say no. They're going to say no to those 3 pills. Choose one. It'll make you feel really good. But one of those might be laced with fentanyl because I remember them saying that at CIC. And I'm not going to try one of those because I know that might be a really bad idea. So that's the youth side of it. Just a small snippet of why I think we're successful and different. And secondly, on the recovery support side of it, we're non-clinical. We're completely non-clinical. But what we do is we create connection. And Jody's referred to that a couple of times. And connection is all about creating that circle of support around you so that there's accountability, there's a feeling of self-worth by giving back. And the recovery support participants, they're leaving in an hour from now to go up to a YMCA sleepaway camp, which we've done many times before. And they'll all be together. There are 25 to 30 of them. They'll go zip lining, they'll go fishing, they'll go hiking. They sit around a campfire and they just are together. And it's that connection. And without that, a few of them have said, goodness, I'd have probably picked up again. But for the fact that I knew I'd probably let down my friends who are in this circle. So that connection is so important to their health and well-being. And we create those opportunities through sober, social and skills-based events and activities.
You're back on the word connection again. And we're with you, Jody. You keep working on that picture. Can you hear me, Jody? We'll carry on. What you mentioned DARE, and I've heard enough criticism of DARE over time. In fact, people saying that actually what it does is provide a menu of interesting drugs. And rather than being the kid at the party that says no, they says, oh, if this is what it does, maybe I'll give it a shot. The other thing I would say, you mentioned there are 3 pills, try one, and the one might have fentanyl. I would argue that all 3 of them probably have fentanyl these days.
Yeah. Statistics are showing that, 19 something percent of overdose fatalities caused by fentanyl. Yes.
And actually, I remember when one of the youth died, and I was talking to one of the people that was telling me about it. It's not when you're going to die; it's if you're going to die. It's when you're going to die if you continue to use, which was call to action in a big way.
Okay, so I promised I'd tell you what I think makes you unique.
Yes.
And in participating with a group in New York State about recovery and getting people into recovery, and there were former addicts, parents. It was a similar sort of very heterogeneous group.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, when people ask, what do we need to do? What do people need the most to help initiate recovery? And the answer was shelter. Finding a place, a safe place, just a safe place to sleep. I think what makes you unique is that for your organization, you have managed to put a roof over the organization. So it is a place. It is not, I know it's people, but the people are in a place. And if you go to that place, you will encounter those people. You will encounter the same people. You'll encounter something that you can depend upon. There's a stability to what you've put a roof on. Does that make sense to you?
Right.
I like that. It's funny, last night when I was leaving work, I saw 2 gentlemen sitting on our front porch in Adirondacks, and I didn't know who they were. So I stepped outside and introduced myself and said, welcome, basically, who are you? And they were waiting to go into an AA meeting that we were having in about half an hour. And they were going through step 5, the 5th step from the 12 steps of the AA program. And I said, would you like to come inside? We have water, we have coffee. I could have knocked them over with a feather, Bill. They were so taken aback by the fact that we have this welcoming home and that they can walk in whenever they want and grab that coffee, grab a snack, whatever they want. They're actually welcome. It's not a dingy church basement, like Jody said. It's a beautiful, welcoming home with really welcoming people. And they were, the guy, when after the meeting, a little later, one of them came upstairs and shook my hands and thanked me so much for just making him feel so welcome. Tiny gesture. And it went a long way. It speaks volumes to me.
Mm-hmm.
The irony is not lost on me that this welcoming home, and there's a metaphor here, I think, in terms of what you do, that the building you acquired was originally a funeral home.
Yes.
And you've taken a place for the dead and made it a place for the living.
Yes. Agreed.
I don't know how many people have told you that, or I'd
Nobody.
like to.
You're the
Oh,
first.
good. Oh, good. I had an original thought.
You sure it wasn't AI generated, Bill?
No, yes, I am.
Yeah, when we first purchased the place, and I, as a benefactor, actually gifted us the place and then gave us the money because it was really had been run down and everything needed repair basically in the building. So they fortunately funded all that. So we had this beautiful home with a back building in it. But that was one of the things that they had said is we buried way too many children. They were very supportive of what we were going to be doing in that building because so many that they had buried that were young, as we were witnessing in our not only our community but across the United States.
Even though
Well,
we're now taking business away from them, hopefully.
they used to, I don't know, do they still have a branch in Basking Ridge?
Yes,
Okay. Do you network at all with similar organizations?
yes.
But yeah, very much so.
How do you find them, or how do they find you?
We do an awful, we're not behind our desks very much, Bill. I always say to our team that I don't know a time when we haven't gone somewhere and some good has come of it. I never see networking events and tabling events and meetings being for naught. There's normally some good of it, good comes of it. And whether it's them referring us to another connection or them themselves. But we wouldn't be here today as strong as we are without the partnerships that have been afforded us, whether it's sharing, going to a local horse stable and letting our recovery support participants groom a horse and go for a little trot around the what you call paddock, and or it's going up to the YMCA camp for this weekend, or using a church kitchen which has only ever had coffee made in it, using their kitchen to actually teach recovery support participants how to actually cook some basic food which they've never done before. And so without those partnerships, I think we'd be a much smaller and outreach and less impactful organization.
Where, if anywhere, where do you see, what do you see about your potential for growth? How might you grow, or do you want to grow any larger? How do you want to keep the organization maximally functional?
We just had a strategic plan meeting, so we like to look at the next 3 to 5 years, and this is our third strategic plan that we've come up with. And interestingly enough, we had a lot of reach goals from the last two, and we've actually done more than those reach goals. So I'm proud to say that. We have opened up our geographic area to whatever is there. Obviously, we want to do it within the confines of what our capacity is going to be, and that's personnel and funding. Funding is a huge challenge right now. We are largely dependent upon federal and state grants that are somewhat at risk with the change in climate. We're trying to navigate that right now and again, be nimble and pivot. And so that's what we're in the process right now of seeing where the potential funding sources could come if these federal and state grants dry up. But one of our grants that we put out there is working with the Y system, the Greater Somerset County Y, which has 7 branches. So we'd be able to have a huge reach if we got this grant to be able to push that out even further. So we are moving the margins, if you will, of our service area from the Somerset Hills. We've already moved in a lot of other communities in Somerset County, even in recovery support, where we have our peer support specialists in those different areas. We are open to what opportunities that we can have capacity for and funding for, but we certainly don't want to abandon our core mission, which is our local mission that we've been supporting for a very long time and have been supporting us. We be here. We have so many angels that have supported us to have a fully paid building that we don't even have a mortgage on. That was just an act of God in my mind. And we've had so many of those benefactors that have stepped up and supported us that we would not be here without them. And I think more and more, we just had a great gala. We had capacity at the gala. So I feel like we have a lot of momentum and support and new supporters coming our way, understanding what we do in so many areas. One thing we didn't mention is the area of chronic pain, which we have been in for a long time, many years now. There are so many people that are kind of on long-term opioids to manage pain. It was the number 2 prescribed drug for Medicare for a long time, Percocet and Oxycontin. And so we're trying to get healthy ways to manage pain, and that's been a huge push push for us is get people weaned off the drugs into other ways to manage that pain.
You're talking about my contemporaries, I believe.
I would say
And mine. 55 and older, Bill.
exactly.
55 and older.
We're all going in that direction.
Yeah, yeah. It's and Jody talked about that. We last year we were in at the VA. There's a VA campus, Veterans Administration campus in Basking Ridge, and we delivered one of our. It's a 6-week workshop on chronic pain, and a lot of them are round the clock taking opioids, even waking up in the middle of the night needing opioids for their pain. And 3 of them at the end of a 6-week workshop that we did reported that they were taking opioids less because they decided that they were going to start walking more. So they'd go for a little walk and come back, and then another one would join them, and then they'd push a little bit further. And by the end of the 6 weeks, they were reaching the perimeter of the VA campus and walking back, which may be close to a mile there and back. And it was beginning to free up their joints, and they were feeling a lot better about themselves. And opioid use, especially during the middle of the night, had decreased. And they were very encouraged by that. And it was just small steps that really are very impactful. But back to where do we see ourselves? As Jody said, we've been going around the county, particularly in areas hardest hit by overdose fatalities. And we basically take our show on the road, put it in the back of a car, and try and deliver harm reduction supplies, education, and referrals to other resources such as housing, food, and so on, as best we can. Jody's dream would be to go nationwide, and she'll never let that one go. And I love it. But right now we're Somerset County focused. We do get a lot of requests from New Jersey State communities, and we do try and help them as best we can. But we have to be careful within our capabilities and capacity that we don't dilute ourselves too much.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you about that dream, Jody. Just for the sake of the dream, what would nationwide mean?
That we have these prevention and recovery support programs in every community. I've had so many people in my job, my day job. This is my other job, but in my day job, I was able to speak before a group of people across the country, and what we did resonated so much with 100 people in the room that the stories came back to me. I'd love to do that in my community. I'd love to do that in my community. And it was like, we should be doing this in everybody's community. It's a nationwide problem. Why are we not doing this in everything? And it's part of it is, again, it requires resources, it requires leadership, it requires money. But if we can help people by launching them, giving them most of the resources, just find some personnel and maybe some grants or something, we can do this everywhere because prevention's important. We were having this conversation recently, not knowing where the climate is going to be in prevention. These are our future. It's the same story as why we got started. We can't continue to lose kids by these things that may happen when they're not maybe making the right choices, inadvertently being prescribed. Hopefully that part of it's gone away. We did a lot of education on that. But let's say that they went down a path that they might not choose again because, again, you're naive or risk takers when we're young. There's a lot of behavior in there that lends itself to trying things out. We can't abandon those. We've got to understand that and say, how can we make sure that they know something akin to the DARE program, but hopefully maybe more akin to where we are right now. When we started this, I met with 5 individuals in recovery because I wanted to understand where they came from and how they got where they got. And one of the individuals who has passed away, he overdosed and he passed away, but a gem of a young man and his really sad life lost. But he sat down, he goes, I was one of those risk takers. I was the guy jumping off the high dive, doing a double flip. And anything I always wanted to push the margins. And he said, the DARE program was like a recipe book for me. He said, don't try marijuana. And then I tried it and I really liked it. Don't try alcohol. I tried it. I really liked it. He goes, I just kept going up the playbook. And he said, I got into heroin. And he said, I loved heroin because I was that anxious kid. And it really solved a lot of issues for me that I had personally. And he goes, I loved heroin at the beginning. And he said, and then I hated heroin. I saw how it destroyed me, how it destroyed my family, how it changed everything. And this was a very gifted musician as well, might I say. And he said it just turned my life around. And he was trying to make a video with us. It was scheduled to try to make a video with us at the time that he actually passed away and went into rehab and passed away eventually. But he gave us kind of an insight into the mindset of somebody that might make those choices that aren't necessarily the ones he knew was going to lead him down this path. He said, if I knew where I was going to land, I would never have made that first choice. So how do we help kids to do it? And Andi alluded to this. We have this youth leaders forum. This is youth led, sending messaging to youth. How much more powerful is it than that? There's two of them are on the National Drug Council, inputting at the national level, because these kids are so motivated to try to help other young individuals. And maybe that's something we're onto, that they don't have at the national level. It's everybody talking down me and Andi. We're not going to be the good deliverers of the message. But how about your contemporaries? What if they tell you these are the stories? This is where you end up if you make these choices. And oh, by the way, maybe we get a block of students that realize and respect their bodies and decide that there are other ways and other paths in life.
Let's see if I can hang on to them both. You've given me two thoughts here. One is I'm back on national, somewhere between your local community county group and nationwide. Have you ever thought of the idea of having for want of a better word, a sister or a brother organization somewhere else in the country, somebody that you worked with, even possibly help sponsor in some ways, or help that you could work with or bring along and help them develop?
Yes, I've already spoken to a couple people where, yes. And we have help organizations, Bill, across the way. We, as Andi talked to you, we did a toolkit way back when. We took our material, we created a toolkit, then we worked with the Horizon Foundation and Rutgers Medical and Farm Schools. And then that toolkit was on their webpage, was on Horizon, on our webpage for a long time, still there. So other communities, we've directed them to say, just grab and go. You want the resource material, we'll give you everything you can to get started. So we do have the template, and there have been many communities. Andi's helped shepherd a lot of them along the journey, of many in New Jersey and even across the country.
And this may sound like a very small and simple question. Do you have a library?
What do you mean a library?
We have a bookshelf.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Do you have a shelf with any number of, there's so many wonderful authors, so many wonderful people that have written, that would be useful. One of the people that comes to mind, and unfortunately he's no longer with us, a man named David Poses, wrote a book called The Weight of Air.
Right.
And it's about his experience, his thoughts on DARE, for example, which you described, Jody, as just being a shopping list of how we move on.
Yes.
And it occurred to me that to have a library of both books of various authors, and also video play things like this radio show that people could listen to, resources that would help your education efforts. And I'm telling you what to do.
No, I think that's a good suggestion.
I put my head on it's relatively inexpensive way to reach people. One of my recent guests on this show was a woman named Jessica Hoppy, and she wrote her book about her addiction, her recovery. She grew up in Mendham.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's our backyard.
It is in your backyard.
Yeah.
All right. I'm trying to think. Is there anything I've left out? Your chance to self-promote. Any heroes, any people on a national scale, or any people that have influenced either of you particularly?
Chris Herron helped us a lot at the beginning. I don't know, he's got that 30 on 30. Sponsored him twice locally. He was extremely impactful, and the value that he brought to the youth, oh my gosh, you could have heard a pin drop when he spoke in that auditorium. That changed lives right there in front of it. Those kids were like locked in. Realized his fall from grace, from being an NBA star to like literally living off the streets with a needle in his arm. You can't get anything worse than what he lived, and how he changed his life around, and then gave hope to people that have had this to maybe reverse course and make different choices going forward. He was really good. I think we have a lot more work to do. We're not even close to tackling this issue, and that's why I hope the resources don't go away or dry up, because youth will always be drawn to something that is risk-taking behavior. It's just those individuals are going to be there. And we can't afford, because the drugs are too dangerous right now, that we can't afford to continue to lose them. So we have to continue to educate on the risks and let them know that there are resources like we are. If you do, unfortunately, if you have become addicted to something, whether it's drugs or alcohol, that there are resources out there to help you find the path back.
You'll remember, Jody, at a town hall we held back in the early days, there was a gentleman who'd lost his son called Mr. Bill Williams.
Yeah.
Was the most eloquent
Yes,
and memorable presentation. When you get somebody who has tragically that experience, that lived experience as a family member, I think nothing hits harder to another parent when they can see someone like you, Bill. Your crusade to honor William and try and get the word out is just monumental. And you're a huge part of our getting on our feet at the beginning. So thank you for that.
Now you're going to make an old man weep on the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You motivated us big time.
Any thoughts, any last words, any benedictions here?
If you need our help, reach out. We're here to support and help other communities do just the same. It's a national problem.
Yeah.
And where would people find you? If they just did a search for community in crisis, you'd appear?
Yeah, we've got phone numbers all over the place. I will say, Bill, if somebody's listening to this who needs help but is too scared to reach out for a reason, usually stigma, I will say that those that do reach out, somewhat reluctantly a lot of the time, once we are in contact, their life completely changes. I can see someone will walk into our location, our headquarters, and I can meet them and say, "Hi, welcome. How can I help you? I'm having a problem myself or my child." And until I get one of my recovery support team in the room, I can chat to them and but when the actual person, the peer, walks in the room, magic takes place in that room. There's an immediate connection, an understanding, an unspoken understanding. This person knows my pain and they're going to help me and they're going to do everything they can to try and get my life back on track or that of my child. They're amazing, Bill, this team. And I just would urge anybody, if they just have an easy quote unquote question about their child's marijuana use, or if they have a real concern about their own use or whatever the substance, our team is unparalleled in terms of complete acceptance, complete compassion, and absolute understanding because of the lives they've already lived themselves.
Agreed. And thank you for what you're doing, Bill. Keep it up.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll close the words that I've heard over and over are team, communication, and community. And connection, excuse me. How can I leave connection out?
Yep.
Perfect.
That's
Connection's the cure.
there we are.
Yep.
Okay. That's
you.
all the time we have for the Kingfisher Project. My guests have been Jody D'Agostini, Board Chair, and Andi Williams, Executive Director of Community in Crisis. Thank you both for your time this evening and for all you've done for your community and beyond.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much.